Let's answer the question, is it wise to date unbelievers? Dating in this day and age can be very challenging. So before you say yes to another date, consider these things. First, take time to evaluate. Why do you want to date an unbeliever? Ask yourself that question. I think it's really good to think about that and evaluate the why of making that decision. The next thing to evaluate then is, what are the risks and possible rewards for dating this person that you might have in mind in particular that's an unbeliever? Identify risks and rewards. I think it's also very important, remember your standards. Before you date anyone, before you go into the dating chapter of your life, you should have a criteria for who you want to date. What are the character traits? What are the values that you want this person to share? It's very important for you to remember or to create those standards before you even go about dating. And the reason is because it's a much easier thing to whittle down a list of possible people you'd want to go on a date with than to go out on a date with every person that might come along and realize that you could find something attractive in a person in their personality or maybe in their physical attributes, but they aren't a Christian and they don't share your values at all, and now you find yourself in a really difficult situation. So make sure you remember the standards that you have, what you want that person to have in their character, and the values that you want them to have. And then lastly, apply scripture to the situation. Generally speaking, we can look at 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 and 15 and learn some good insight. It says, "Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? What harmony can there be between Christ and the devil? How can a believer be a partner with an unbeliever?" Now, the reason why this is said more generally is this context of this, Paul isn't talking about dating or marriage. He's talking more about a business relationship. But generally speaking, you can apply this to dating an unbeliever and to say, what do you really have in common? How can light and darkness, they can't go together? How can a believer really partner with an unbeliever? And the reason is because you don't really share a whole lot of common ground. If you believe in Jesus and what that means for your life, hopefully that you want to honor God with your life, to a person that doesn't care about God and doesn't care about the standards by which they should live, it's just generally a bad idea. Now, Ephesians chapter 4 speaks a little bit more specifically, and let's look at that. "With the Lord's authority I say this, live no longer as the Gentiles do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from the life God gives because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. They have no sense of shame. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. But that isn't what you learned about Christ. Since you've heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception, and instead let the Spirit renew your thoughts and your attitudes." So see, more specifically than to dating, what can you really benefit in connecting your heart to someone whose heart is hardened towards God, who is more interested in lustful pleasure and the things that this world offers than anything to do with God? And I think that's a really important thing for you to consider, that in dating an unbeliever, though it might seem innocent or what's the harm in that, it could just be for fun. Again, the question really becomes, what do you stand to lose for allowing your heart to open up to someone whose heart is far away from God, as Paul says in Ephesians, is totally hardened towards God? There really is no commonality there that's worth pursuing. So consider these things before you say yes to your next date. Dating can be so hard and so confusing, but at the very least, I think you can look at this information and answer that question for yourself. Is it wise to date an unbeliever?